even in the darkest hour. Do not lose hope.
Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are playing Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. First review of 2024, baby. Here we go. This one's an interesting story because I was on my winter break as this review code rolled in, and I wasn't really in the worker's mindset quite yet. I was thinking to myself, do I really want to begin my work early? I'm kind of interested. You know what I'll do? I'll give it a chance. I'll see what happens. I'll fire it up. And if it catches my attention, great. All the more power to the game. Well, here I am. And so, yeah, all the power to Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. This is one of Ubisoft's best games in recent years, and it brings it back to a time where they were more experimental and fun-focused. You see, Ubisoft were the shepherds of the Sands of Time trilogy, which we just covered in a recent video. From Sands of Time to Warrior Within, The Two Thrones, these are all fantastic games as part of a trilogy featuring the Prince, with great movement, great combat, phenomenal cinematography for its time. Prince of Persia was just ahead of the pack, and then they took a lot of that technology and used it to build Assassin's Creed. Now, when The Lost Crown was first announced, many people were displeased. We're going back to 2D. But that's the thing. Prince of Persia first began as a 2D series. It wasn't until 1999 with Prince of Persia 3D that it moved into the 3D space. When you look at that side by side with Sands of Time, it's a world of a difference. So Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown kind of came at me with a bit of an uphill battle, and it won swimmingly. I have some complaints, but overall, this game is awesome. I'm here to tell you why it should be on your radar as one of the first pickups you make in 2024. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here and you're into nostalgic retrospective content or the occasional day one review, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing. Shout out again to Ubisoft for the early review code. I had a while with this game, and it only took about 20 hours to get through, but there's plenty of content here, which is one of the big surprise factors for me. That was one of the reasons I actually fired it up. I was like, how long could it be even if I end up not liking it, right? Oh man, it takes you on a ride. There's like 13 different biomes, tons of different enemy types, secret loot to find, upgrades to get, collectibles everywhere. This is a full-fledged 2D metroidvania game, and it is fantastic. So you play as Sargon, one of the immortals. Prince Hassan has been taken. He's been abducted by one of the immortals. And you're trying to figure out, well, what's going on here, right? Like, why are you betraying us? And that is one of the many mysteries in the story. As you arrive at this mount, you start to see time passing differently for everybody. You bump into a fellow immortal, and they tell you, where have you been? And you're like, I was in there for a few minutes. Dude, it's been years for them. And sometimes it's been even more years for people. Like, I've been here for 30 years. The way that time passes creates this mystery, this discomfort, for me at least, where I was pleasantly hooked by the main narrative here, trying to learn who really is Sargon, what's happening here, why was the prince abducted in the first place, and so on and so forth. While I think many people are going to sing the praises of the gameplay, I found the story to be one of the stars of the show here in Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. So if you are looking for a great narrative, by the way, not just in writing, which I have to call out specifically because I say this with all the love in my heart, this is a rarity for Ubisoft. They have some of the worst written AAA video games in this industry. To see them go over here with something a little more experimental and absolutely nail it from storytelling to writing was a surprise to me. Some of the VA can be hit or miss. Most times, Sargon is on point. There are moments like when something, I can't spoil it, happens to Prince Hassan, that his reaction to the sequence of events is very flat, where I feel like there was a disconnect between the VA and the voice director. Otherwise, though, the script is pretty tight, and I gotta say, I really enjoyed this fresh take on a time distortion within a location and how it impacts the characters around you. But just because it's 2D does not mean it lacks spectacle. The way the game has splashes of color, it reminds me almost of Persona, where it creates this stroke around the character as you unleash special attacks, as big cutscenes happen, the way things transition. It's an extremely stylish video game too. You could tell compared to other Ubisoft games, and even if you remove that from the formula, there was just a lot of passion packed into Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Like, the team genuinely wanted to do this. And you have to imagine that this was a selection the team made, given when you think about Prince of Persia and the demands that have been made, and the initial fan reaction speaks to itself. People wanted a 3D Prince of Persia. But make no mistake, 2D takes nothing away from this game and in fact adds to it. Granted, I was playing on Nintendo Switch this whole time, but it was running at 60 FPS the whole way through. It looked pretty good on the big screen and especially in handheld, but I'm sure if you were to play it on a PlayStation, Xbox, or PC, it looks even better there. But what I'm pleased to say is on Nintendo Switch, the one that I always like to request a code for Switch when I can and when it makes sense, because to me it's like, are you going to hide this one from us? I think of Mortal Kombat 1 on Switch, like, are you going to hide that from us? But no, they were confident right away. Code arrives, and it runs beautifully. Onto the gameplay. This is a 2D Metroidvania, so you've kind of seen this one before. What I like most in the early goings is that Prince of Persia Lost Crown doesn't do that thing that many games do where here's your suite of powers, feel how good it is, right? And we're going to take all that away. Worst game design trope, especially in this genre, where I think sometimes it's a bit ancient and it can test your patience. Here, you start off decently powerful, but you don't have every trick in the book available to you right away. That's part of the carrot dangled in front of you, unlocking these powers, interacting with the environment in different ways, getting around this enormous world in new, unique, and creative ways. And they leave a lot to discovery. They have an exploration mode and a guided mode at the start that you can pick. I played most of the game on exploration mode, only turning on guided mode as a reviewer just to experiment, see how it goes. And this game very much wants you to find things on your own. Knowing it's Ubisoft and how they're typically known for the waypoints and lots of crammed UI, I wanted to see how guided mode felt. And they'll throw like a little marker on your map. Otherwise, it's up to you to figure out how you're going to get there. So it's very free, it's very open. You don't have to tackle this game in a particular way. Of course, you're going to meet your dead ends where you're going to need certain powers to get there. But at times, the exploration can even feel a bit overwhelming. There were moments I was going into one room and I had 3 different exits, all leading to places that could have had tantalizing rewards. And you are aptly rewarded, whether it be new amulets, collectibles, currency. You're always finding something that's pushing you forward. The combat mechanically feels good. It's a pretty simple input system. You have the ability to dodge and parry. You can also do quick attacks. You can knock enemies up into the air where Sargon really specializes. Air comboing them. There's just one attack button. Sometimes you can slam them down to the ground. You can also do charge attacks and then those special attacks I mentioned earlier, which are really flashy, good for tough enemies. Some of the boss fights in the game are also pretty difficult, which I gotta appreciate. There were multiple deaths in this game, and I wouldn't even say it was due to skill issue. It was just, hey, these are tough bosses, they have unique mechanics, and you have to figure them out. Some are far more creative than others, like some have these great parry windows, these great moments where they change up their attack pattern. Others just have a bigger health bar, and they're a little less exciting. The biggest problem I think I had with the game is balancing. Now, one thing I will note is I was going through the reviewer's guide that they send us and looking at what future patches will include. And one thing that they are going to be fine-tuning is damage output for Sargon. Even when I went through and upgraded his weapons in my personal experience, and this may be even different by day one, Sargon feels really, really weak against the common enemy. I'll fight one enemy and they will take 8 hits, and that's with upgraded weaponry. I found this disappointing because the combat systems feel great, but the combat itself can be annoying and tedious and lead to some annoying deaths, which the game's biggest problem is the runbacks. I think it's great that Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown, is a difficult video game. It surprised me, and it was a welcome surprise. I love that the boss fights are tougher. I like that I felt that moment of anxiety of, okay, I'm out of potions, and I gotta find that next resting point. When you see that golden trail, you know you're just right on the edge of the doorstep here, and you're about to find the promised land. Like, that feeling is incredible. The problem is, when you die, and they send you all the way back across the map, and all the enemies respawn, you gotta re-platform, refight, and the fights being the bigger problem with the two, that's where some frustration for me grew. Because a lot of my deaths were, wow, I was slapping away at this enemy for 12 hits now, and he only just died, and because there's 4 on screen, inevitably I'm going to get hit, and you're really limited on potions. In the early going, you'll get a max of 2 for like the first 10 hours. Even if you end up just dumping a ton of currency into your potions, they limit you at a certain point. So yeah, it's a very skill-based game, which I think is great. I just think sometimes that it doesn't feel balanced with that challenge in mind, where the enemies are far more dangerous than you, the player, where I feel like they could just even the playing field, where you are as dangerous as them, so they can hit me hard, but let me hit them as hard. So sometimes the challenge can feel a touch artificial, but otherwise, that was my main critique walking away. It has a sound gameplay loop of, as you've seen before in Metroidvania games, you explore the map, you find new powers, and you can explore it in unique ways. One of my favorite parts of this game that really brought me a sense of joy and accomplishment was the platforming. There are even moments of clever platforming puzzles. Like there was one where you could spawn multiple instances of Sargon, and you had to have him do different things within the puzzle itself that would unlock new pathways for the future Sargon. And so this is where it plays with the narrative as well as the gameplay mechanics and makes for really unique moments. But it's not just creativity, it's also, again, being mechanically sound. I think of one of my favorite 2D platformers ever as Ori and the Blind Forest and Will o' the Wisps. Just pixel perfect. Every jump is just accounted for the right amount of distance. Everything feels super fine-tuned. And when I look here at Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, I feel the same way. Like when I'm bouncing off a wall and just air dashing enough over a trap, dropping off, teleporting back to my old self, and so on and so forth. There's enough tricks in the book where when you complete this room that's full of traps, like a labyrinth of traps, and you get to the other side, it is that same feeling like you even got back in Sands of Time, like, oh yeah, I did that, and that felt incredible. So this game manages to make you feel really good in platforming, and not so good at times in combat. Not all the time, but it's just something worth being aware of in case they don't scale the combat accordingly, which is something you have to be on the lookout for, because it's not the end of the world. It's just something that I think can destabilize otherwise a ton of momentum you have with the game. Like, you'll find yourself loving it. Man, he's crazy. Why was he hating on this? And then you'll die, and you'll die again. You'll realize how annoying those runbacks can be with the combat balancing. Hopefully, they fix it in time for you to pick it up and try for yourself and have that not be an issue for you like it was for me. I mentioned rewarding exploration and things that you're going to find. A lot of your power is built less off gear. You're already set with gear, so worry not, you don't have another gear system here. Instead, what you have is the amulet system, and they give those out sparingly. You can buy a few at the shop, and you can find amulet slots around the overworld, which are really exciting because then you get that feeling of, nice, I can equip a new power. These amulets aren't stat boosts like, do more damage, take more damage, and so on and so forth. They're things like unlock a fourth hit in your combo, more active abilities like that, slow down time in a medium-sized bubble when you parry rather than a small time bubble. And that's what I liked about the amulet system. It's quality over quantity, which is a rarity nowadays. Instead of giving me a million pieces of loot, which has its own set of strengths and weaknesses, I like that this game opts to say, here's a small suite of amulets, and these are all upgradable with a currency that isn't handed out to you in a large amount. So you really have to pick carefully how you want to build out, because even though the limit can increase, like you might be messing with 6 for most of the game. So yeah, in a day and age where loot kind of sucks, just wanted to say the loot here is pretty great. Otherwise, you could spend your currency on weapon upgrades. You can get a bow and arrow. So it's just, yeah, there's a lot here. Everything's like a multi-tool for both platforming as well as combat. So like air dashes are naturally good in combat to cover distance quickly and to get out of the way quickly, but also they're great for platforming. Your bow and arrow can turn into this boomerang that can spin inside gears, that can lift up elevators and help you get to certain places that otherwise would have been locked off. There are times you can create a clone of yourself, walk into a dangerous area, lure the danger away, and teleport behind them and keep going on your merry way. Like, the game just does a great job of giving you a small suite of powers a la Dishonored and making you feel really, really good about it. So yeah, Prince of Persia and The Lost Crown is pretty fantastic. I gotta say, I was floored with how much I enjoyed it. Combat woes aside, you know, the run-back woes aside, this is a great game. And if you're looking for a solid 2D Metroidvania, or you find yourself missing Prince of Persia, this is a pretty good pickup, I would say. I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts on Prince of Persia: Lost Crown down below. Fire away. Other than that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace